Welcome to the Pastor and Intern podcast with Pastor Eric Dyer, Intern Will Emery, and content lead Kayla Popwell. Looks like we're going to have to send out the milk cartons again.
The APB. Where's Kayla?
Kayla is missing again, everyone.
Man, she's missing all the time.
She is.
I think she's on fourth vacation. I think that's where she's at, which is typical, right?
You
like
know,
everybody has fourth vacation.
College kids, what are you going to do with us?
Yeah, nothing. Not a thing. Not a thing.
Oh, so today, thank you for being patient with last week's episode. We did not plan on sending out Eric's talk on homosexuality.
It's been really busy.
Yeah, sometimes you just have to do what you have to do. With summer coming to a close, this should be kind of our last shorter episode.
Yes.
We'll start back probably in the middle of August to the end of August with the longer, more in-depth episodes of different things.
I mean, I wouldn't set the expectation that high, but let's go with that.
We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Next week, I would expect the same thing. What did you talk about last time on Breathe?
I talked about the roles of men and women in church.
Yes, and that'll probably be what you hear next week.
Yeah, because next week is going to be like...
Yeah, well, no, you'll still be in town, though, right?
Yeah, I'll be here.
Okay, maybe not then. Maybe not. We have no idea what we're talking about.
We'll see.
If you can tell, which is really good, actually, to lead into this episode, because we're talking about D-Now this week. That's happening in 4 days, which is insane.
Oh, gosh.
Right?
And we've made it more
crazy.
Insane. But
and you can just tell by this beginning of the podcast of how scattered our brains are.
Gosh, but like if we could just detail everything that's going on in our lives, which we're not going to do because it take too much time, you would realize why we're this way, and D-Now doesn't help anything.
No.
So we're just in that. I've just accepted this is the season of life I'm in.
Right. So there'll be two different things we'll talk about this episode. One's D-Now. Eric has no idea about the second one. I'm going to throw him a curveball at the end of this.
Let's freaking do it.
But first, let's talk about D-Now. So why don't you tell them what is D-Now for those who do not know?
Okay, so
formerly M-Now.
Since I've been here, it's almost my 2-year anniversary, by the way, but since I've been here, I've always done M-Now. Okay, so it's called Mission Now. Basically, we have a speaker come in and a band, and then we go on mission. So this is for every church in the area, all the surrounding counties. It's not just for our church. And we worship together, hear the word, and then we go out and serve. Well, this year, we changed it to D-Now just for a bunch of different reasons. We're adding in, we're taking out the mission part, but we're adding in more focused on discipleship as far as the speaker goes, and then we are adding some fun elements to it. So we are having a disco, which sounds ridiculous.
Yeah, define that.
Ridiculous. Okay, so in the 1980s, they had these things called discos, which were dance parties where they would sing the YMCA. They would wear bell-bottoms and high platform shoes, the works.
Are you wearing bell-bottoms and high platform shoes?
I'm going to work on that today. Today's the day that I'm going to work on that.
Okay.
I know that people are probably thinking, okay, you probably should have not waited. But it's not that I waited necessarily. Like, it's more like the priorities. But anyways, we're going to do that, and then we're going to have a kickball tournament on Saturday. And we're having our kids from our church locked into our MAC building, which
sounds like
fun.
Woo.
A great idea, and it might end up being a great idea. But until then, I'm going to hold out my judgment. But anyway, so that's pretty much what D-Now is, and I'm really excited about it.
Yeah. So what are some? By the way, when we talk of disco, we're not talking about any kind of provocative dancing.
No, there'll be room for Jesus.
Yeah, they'll be doing the
YMCA,
the chicken dance. I mean, we're talking very basic here.
Yeah,
literally, there will just be a disco ball.
Yeah, it'll be more like a middle school dance.
Yeah,
and there'll be even less touching than a middle school dance. You know what I'm saying?
There won't be any.
Like there'll be people on the sides. There'll be wallflowers.
Right.
But yeah, it's a disco though. Like there's going to be some afros. And what is that decoration called again? Disco ball.
Yeah, disco ball.
Yeah. How can you forget a disco ball?
I don't know. At the disco.
See, that's where we are. That's
exactly right. So so you mentioned the fun stuff: the disco ball, the kickball tournament, staying in the MAC building.
Yeah,
that'll be great. But tell us, it's okay. So we have 3 sessions, right? Friday night, Saturday morning, Saturday night. The band is more than this.
Yes.
Right? Mm-hmm. Do you remember the speaker's name? Is this going to be terrible?
I'm going to call him Mr. Newsom.
That's right. It is. Let's see. I'm going to tell you what it is.
See, this is the beauty of technology.
As soon as I find it on my computer.
So honestly, I think I have not been able to tell literally every single person that's asked me.
It's Blake Newsom.
See, I remember the last name.
I know he used to be a preaching professor at New Orleans, right?
Yeah, so he's got to be it.
And now he's a pastor at Mobile. Yeah, hopefully. That's the goal. He should be. So what are your kind of expectations? Let's start for the event as a whole, and then we'll kind of go down to just FBC. But like for the event as a whole, what are your expectations for the 3 sessions?
Man, I don't know that I have like a numbers goal. I would love to see 700 people. I would love to see that.
Right.
But the reality is that I'm not driven by numbers. And of course I want to have fun. Of course I want students to have conversations with people that they don't go to church with. Like that's what I want. But overall, I think my expectation is just that the students feel free to worship however they feel like they need to, and that the pastor or the speaker that comes in faithfully exegetically preaches from the Word, because we get caught up in all these devotional books and our Bible app and Sunday school and all this other stuff, which all those things are great, but there's just nothing that replaces the Word of God in our life, especially proclaimed from the stage. And so I think my expectation is just to have a symbol of the cooperation between churches in our area, because that's what it really is. It's a cooperation of churches that say, you know what, we are our own individual churches, which I love. I'm for church membership, but we're also the one church. So
right, and anyway. It's not necessarily a Baptist thing, correct?
No, it is not a Baptist thing.
It's everyone.
Even though I wouldn't have any problem with that, saying it's a Baptist thing, because I'm a Baptist. But right. No, anybody from any church can come, and we won't say anything.
Right. So we're expecting big things, right?
Yeah.
For the event as a whole. So
well,
what about?
And I think, we get so scared of big expectations because we feel like we're biting off more than we can chew. But I think there has to be a point, and we've talked about this, a point where you just have to look at God and say, we serve a big God who does big things. And so why would I not expect God to do big things?
Yeah, well, what was it? I was reading yesterday, and it's a quote I'm sure we've all heard before, and I don't know who it's from, but it's that quote that says, you're probably not asking God for enough. You're asking too little of God, and it's that same idea that, we serve this big and mighty God, and so why would we not expect Him to do great and mighty things?
Right.
That He can do.
Makes sense.
It's okay. So for our church, as a unique individual church, it's hosted at our church, but for our group of students, what are your expectations or hopes?
Well, I think, man, there's so many different dynamics that go on. I think our group in general, they like each other. They get along with one another. I think the interesting dynamic that we always go through is because it's Promotion Sunday this Sunday, so all of the 5th graders coming into 6th grade are joining youth, and this is kind of their rite of passage,
right,
if you will. Like this is like
they're hazing or...
Well, I wasn't going to go there, but sure. And so they have a really good opportunity to mesh with the group, because half of them are just ready to be in our basketball gym, and half of them are scared to death that a 17-year-old is going to talk to them. And both are understandable feelings. But at the same time, that's usually what I look forward to the most, because I'm pretty open about it. I deal best with 6th to 8th graders. I just do. That's who I taught in Sunday school for years before I went to seminary. That's just what I do. And there's not many of those people, by the way. But, that's just who I am. And I think another expectation is setting the bar and the expectations for the year. I think that D Now, because this will be my 2nd D Now that I do, and so last year, which I did on a whim, which I wish I had prepared for more in advance, but last year I got all the students together. I think it was Friday night, and this year it'll probably have to be Saturday night just because of how much we're doing. And I sat them down and I said, guys, this is the next year of youth in your life. And there's a ticking time bomb to this thing. Like, you only have this many years in youth, no matter if you go here or you go some other church. Like, you only have this many years. And you only have this amount of time to make an impact. And I tell them, I'm like, right now is the commitment that you're going to be here. You know, right now is the commitment that you are going to be a faithful church member, that you're going to share the gospel in your schools. This is the time, you know. Because we get so caught up in the beginning of school. You know, we have a teachers meeting on Thursday. Football season's just around the corner. All this other stuff. And we get so caught up in all of it. But we can't forget that the reality is that our youth group involvement is coming to an end at some point. And we have to do the work like God has commanded us and sent us, you know. Like J.D. Greer's church. I was listening to his sermon, and he says it all the time, but I just caught it yesterday. He goes, at the end of every service, we say, you are sent. And I think that is a mentality. Like, those are just words, right? But it's a mentality. Like, we are sent. Anytime we're out of the church, we are going. And I think for our group, because we've got a good group of kids, like, I don't know what I did for God to be like, okay, you get this group. And I'm like, yes. You know, now, the new sixth graders coming up may ruin all that. They probably won't. Hopefully not. But, you know, I've got a really great group of kids. And so I'm not worried about them as a whole, but I think it's good enough of a group to make a big difference and have a really big year. And I think D Now is the beginning of all that.
Right. Yeah, and I would agree. I mean, I think we do. D Now is our biggest event. We probably do, right? And that's more solely for the reason that it's just local. We don't like we this year we won't go anywhere.
Right.
Right. We'll never hop on a bus, never hop on a van.
Nope.
It will all be on campus.
Yep.
Which is unique. Every year is different. And so I think it's our biggest event of the year. People invite their friends.
Yeah, because we'll have 60 people here,
and people want to come. I mean, I was on social media something yesterday, and people were asking. No, it wasn't on social. It was somewhere else. But people were asking, "Hey, when is that thing coming up that we went to last year? When is that?"
Yeah.
You know, and they're talking about M Now D Now because they enjoy the event. They like it. You know, they enjoy it, and so I do think I think we have high expectations for both, for the overall experience as well as our students. And it's really cool to get to watch them grow together. Like, we've been playing volleyball this entire past summer, and it's really awesome to get to see them all as we change on teams all the time, and get to see them play together. And they've grown a lot in this past summer.
And I think we really underestimated volleyball.
We did,
because I thought, man, this is gonna bomb. No one's gonna come. I'm gonna get fired. You know, over volleyball, right? Like, what a stupid thought to have. But at the same time, volleyball really gets them all involved. And because it's 6 people at a time, you know.
Right.
So anyway, but
they enjoy it.
I totally agree with you.
Right. Okay. So that's D Now. Now let's switch gears a little bit. Okay. So this is the surprise part, because I knew this one was going to be.
Man, I love surprises.
A little bit shorter, so now we're going to be a little bit longer.
Sure.
And I kind of wish Kayla was here to hear this, because she may know more about this than I do. And you may even from Twitter and stuff, because this has been pretty big. So there's this thing going on. I don't know if you may have seen it. I think it's on ABC. It's called The Bachelorette.
Ooh.
I'm sure you've heard of that before.
I actually had a conversation with a young couple in our church the other day about this.
Did you?
Yeah,
well, it may be about the same thing then.
Okay, you go ahead.
So, which is good.
So you think you've got me.
You know,
do, but
that's
I'm
good.
super cultured.
So The Bachelorette, and then also The Bachelor, right? So The Bachelorette is where there's one girl, and I've never seen the show.
And she's dating a bunch of guys at
once.
Basically,
and trying to figure out who is the one for her.
Sounds
and it's
real
the
moral.
same thing for The Bachelor, right?
Sounds real
which could be a different podcast for a different. But what I want to talk specifically is the girl, and this is probably what you talked about.
You know her name?
It's Hannah Brown.
Yeah, that's right.
Hannah Brown.
Yeah.
And she was, I think the last episode was maybe last night.
Okay.
And she came out and she said, so in her Instagram bio, it says that I love Jesus all the time or something like that.
Yeah.
And then she said this after, I think there was something that came out that talked about she was having sexual relations with the guys on the show. And, which I guess may be common for the show. I don't know. I've never seen
think
the
it's
show.
pretty common.
So people were kind of like, well, this is weird. You claim to be this, but you're doing this. How does that work?
Yeah.
And this was her response, and this is kind of my question to you.
Okay.
Is she says, and I don't know where she said this at. She told it to Entertainment Weekly. This is what I'm on the ChristianPost.com.
That's fine.
So anyways, this is what she said. Regardless of anything that I've done, I can do whatever. I sin daily, and Jesus still loves me. It's all washed, and if the Lord doesn't judge me and it's all forgiven, then no other man, woman, anything can judge me. Okay? So regardless of anything I've
Collective
done,
sigh.
sin daily,
Yeah.
God doesn't judge me,
Yeah.
then I'm good to go.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on, because I think we try to keep it with the culture on the podcast, right?
We try to.
And this was a big deal in, okay, well, she claims to be a Christian, she's doing all of this. This is her response.
Yeah.
So what is your
Okay, so I'm going to give you the nugget of knowledge I have about this show. Okay, I remember when this show came out. Okay, a long time ago. Never watched it, never got into it. I don't think my parents are into it. I'm not judging anybody who watches it, but it's just not my thing. But we had a young couple come over, and we started talking about it. And I hadn't heard anything about it. Well, actually, I had heard a couple things, but I'll get there. And she starts talking about this guy who's on the show who claims to be a Christian.
Yeah, his name's Luke.
Yeah,
Luke P. or something.
Yeah, whatever. And apparently he was upset because she was spending the night with other guys in this fantasy suite. I think that's what they call it. Okay. What a stupid name. Anyway, so he gets mad and says, sex is for marriage, basically. And she gets mad at him, right? And then she goes off. Like, I'm pretty sure she went off on him and told him that she indeed did have some sort of sexual encounter with these guys in her fantasy suite or whatever. And she ends up blowing him off and sending him home and all this stuff.
Yeah, so, okay, well, can we pause there?
Yeah.
And let me read. So they have a conversation through Twitter. I guess this is after he gets sent off.
Oh, okay.
And this is the conversation. Okay, so it's Luke Parker is the guy.
Yeah.
And he adds, her name on Twitter is Alabama Hannah. It says, the difference in how we view sin is seen in the response.
Yes.
I guess the response of the show.
Yeah.
I am weeping at mine, and you are laughing at yours. All sin stings. My heart hurts for the both of us. And she responded and said, time and time again, Jesus loved and ate with, quote-unquote, sinners who laughed. And time again, he rebuked, quote-unquote, saints that judged. Where do you fall, Luke? And then Luke said, there is a difference between eating with sinners who laugh and sinners who laugh at their sin. Sin is the very thing that put Jesus on the cross, and that's not a laughing matter. And Hannah said, I have never said that I find my sin funny. I'm not going to get lectured on appropriate emotional responses by a guy who threw deli meat in a guy's lap. I don't know what that means. I guess
it's
that's
something happened on the show, I think.
But anyways, that was kind of their...
So, again, it's hard. Okay, so I'm not going to defend him here because I've heard some not great stuff about him. I'm not saying that he's not genuine. I'm not saying
I have
that he's
no
not
idea.
or whatever. But I've heard on the show he was just not that great. But the reality is like if you're on a dating show with a bunch of people that probably aren't the best in the world, then you're probably going to start acting like them. So take that for what it's worth. But I think we get into this whole territory of, okay, so what does it mean to be saved? What does it mean? Does it mean I signed a card and got baptized? Does it mean that I've got a free pass? Does it mean I have a get out of jail free card? Does it mean that I am free to sin or whatever? And again, you sprung this on me, so I couldn't do research. But there's the verse where Paul says, "Do we know that we're saved and yet go and sin? No, we sin no more." Right? That's the goal, right? To not sin. And I think the problem with this Alabama Hannah or whatever is that she is actively choosing to, and then on the flip side saying, "Oh well, Jesus forgives me." It's like, okay, well if that's the case, if that's true, then you literally are mocking the death of Jesus on the cross. Because if you can sit there and go, well, my sin that put Jesus on the cross killed him and he saved me so that I can continue sinning, that's kind of the opposite response.
Right.
Jesus died so that you would stop sinning. And again, it's more than that, but that's just basically what Jesus is doing, right? Because when Jesus healed somebody, what did he tell them?
You're forgiven.
You're forgiven. Go and
sin no more.
Sin no more.
Yeah.
See,
yeah.
Man, we're just geniuses here.
I'm telling you.
And again, I'm not saying that Christians don't sin because they do. I'm one of them. Okay, and God does forgive me for that, but it does not seem as it's like if you were to sin and then you feel bad for it and then you ask forgiveness, but then you do it again. That, like, okay, so you're either A, not taking it seriously enough, like the guy's saying, like I weep over my sin, blah, blah, blah. Or B, you have a really warped view of what Jesus did for you in the first place. Like if you think that Jesus died so that you can just keep sinning and you're just okay and Jesus loves me, then you don't know who Jesus is.
No, well, it's that idea is the get out of hell free card, right?
Yeah.
Get a jail free card. It's that.
Yeah, it's like, oh, well, I'm a
protected
Christian now.
Yeah, I'm good to go.
And my sins are forgiven, so I can do whatever I want. It's like, actually, it's the opposite.
And the sad reality of that is that there are many, many, many people
who think that,
who believe that.
Yeah.
Tons of people who don't understand, like you said, the salvation.
Yeah.
And,
well, when we get to the judgment and people start looking at Jesus and saying, well, Jesus loves me, they're going to be rudely awakened.
Yeah, well, it seems like the majority, right? So the most famous quote or verse now is not John 3:16 anymore, right? It's that verse in, was it in Matthew?
Yeah.
That says, judge not.
Yeah, judge not, yeah.
Which, number one's out of context, right? We go into that
incredibly
later.
Out of context.
But, I was reading something, I mentioned this to you a couple months ago, but it's like people don't understand what they're asking for. When they say that you're not the one who judges me, but God judges me, is that my judgment is nowhere near what God's is, right?
Right. Like you think my judgment is bad?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Like it's just like they have this misunderstood idea.
Right, and you've got to think, though, like if we are Christ on the earth, like I was listening to Tony Evans yesterday. He's hilarious, by the way. Like I hadn't listened to him in a long time. If you're listening to the podcast, please go listen to him. He is hilarious. But he was talking about how, like, you watch previews to a movie, and even if it's a terrible movie, they put all the best shots in the preview. He goes, we are literally the preview.
Yeah.
And Jesus is the movie. And if you don't like the preview, like, you're not going to like the thing, right? Like, we are called, like, it just blows my mind that people would think that we can't judge people. Because, again, and I say this stumble in the face, the word judge has a negative connotation to it.
Right.
Right? Like, you can't share Jesus with someone until you judge them, Like, and it's not bad. Like, you're not doing something terrible. You're just saying, I know that you don't know Jesus, and therefore you are going to hell. Therefore, you need Jesus. That's judgment.
That's the most loving thing you can do.
That's not condemnation.
Yeah, right.
Condemnation is saying you don't know Jesus, you're going to hell, go burn in hell. No, that's not what we're telling people.
Right.
Right? There's a clear difference. Judgment and condemnation are not the same word, first of all, and they're not the same thing. And so for this Alabama Hannah or whatever to come out and say, well, I can do whatever I want because my sins are forgiven, tells me that I don't know that any of your sins are forgiven. Because if they were, then you would have the Holy Spirit inside of you convicting you of your sin. Because it doesn't feel like there's any conviction of sin there.
No.
At all. But that's just my opinion.
Right. Well, I'm just reminded of what we talked about in Sunday school in 1 John, and that verse in verse 6, 1 John 1, verse 6, and it says, if we say we have fellowship with him, right, so we're believers, and yet we walk in darkness, we are lying and are not practicing the truth. And it seems like you're walking in darkness with no conviction of sin.
That seems like judgment too, doesn't it?
It does, right? Well, and that because I agree. I agree.
It's just the truth.
Yeah, well, exactly. And was it Rosaria? Is it in her book Openness Unhindered, which we'll probably talk about one day on the podcast?
Oh yeah, we're going to talk about it.
How is she the one who talks about that? Judgment's not what you say to them. It's okay to speak hard truths at people because they need to hear that.
Right.
Right. But judgment's what you do after you speak that hard truth.
Yes.
Is it her that says that?
Yes.
Which is a really good point because judgment could be, hey, you're doing this is dumb, and then you just get rid of them and throw them out and move them to the side. You don't try to help them reconcile back to God and then back to the church.
Because it's this whole idea that someone's sin makes them different than you. Like there's some worse sinner than you because they sin differently than you. It's like, actually, that is not true. Everybody's sin is sin. Bottom line, Now, do we see sin as different? Yeah, we definitely do. Like, we see levels to sin, right?
Right.
God doesn't, though.
No.
God takes every affront as an affront, And so, and again, and I think I said this in Breathe the other day when I did men and women's roles in the church. I said, we've just gotten so used to elevating some sin and devaluing some sin that we've got this warped perspective, especially when it comes to LGBTQ people, and on the high end and on the low end, men and women's roles in the church. But it's sin is sin. It's all sin.
Right.
There's no difference.
Right.
Now, there may be differences in the punishment for that or the consequences of that sin, the sins of themselves, there's no difference.
Right.
God isn't differentiating different people based on their sin.
Right. Which is why grace and mercy goes to all.
Yeah.
There's not a, there's no
Right, but that
stipulations
doesn't
there.
free you up to keep
No.
sinning.
Right.
Makes no
Right.
sense. And I'm
Right.
not saying, and again, there has to be a balance, right? Like, we're not saying that you don't have any sin and you'll never have sin again. So we're not saying you become perfect, quote unquote, because there's clearly in the Bible, and especially in the New Testament, a path of sanctification that people go through, right? That's a big word to mean be more like Jesus. And if you're being more like Jesus, you won't sin as much. It just doesn't make any sense, right? Like, it's like you want your cake, right? But
Yeah.
you don't want to like, get disease ridden just because you eat cake constantly. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just not.
Right.
This doesn't make sense.
Right.
And,
Well, and it was as if somebody called her out on sin, and it was her defense mechanism.
right.
Which is the majority. That's anytime you hear that statement that Jesus hung out with sinners, it's normally that's the first thing they think of when you call them out on a sin is,
Yeah.
well, Jesus hung out with the sinners, right? So I'm good to go, which
Right,
is
but
not
Jesus-
the case. That's
But Jesus didn't go into a fantasy suite.
right. And that normally the sinners he hung out with came to him to hear him speak,
Yeah.
right? So we hear that.
And if he was there, first of all, they knew him.
yeah,
They knew what he
they
was
knew
gonna
of
say.
him, right,
And he came and he spoke truth into their life and told them to sin no more.
right,
So, like, let's back up on
Yeah.
hey, this is what Jesus would or would not do.
right.
Like, let's calm down on that train.
Right. So, Hannah, if you ever end up listening to the Pastor and Intern podcast through any sort of
Oh, God. Wouldn't that be
possible means,
hilarious?
There's absolutely no way, but if you did,
Oh, yeah. Please come on the show. We'd love to talk to you.
yeah, we'd love to.
We'd love to open our Bibles together and talk.
Yeah.
No condemnation here.
So, no, seriously,
We're
and
not
I don't
condemning
think
anybody.
anything that we said, we don't mean that in any kind of harsh way.
No.
But I felt like there's a lot of people who watch these shows and see that, and so I thought it'd be cool to.
And
Talk about
again, it's like it's almost as though they're sending mixed signals to the world. Because how many people watch that show?
I'm sure
millions and
tons.
millions of people.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've got one Christian on one end that's going into fantasy suites and having sexual relations with different people, right? And is on a dating show she's dating like 12 guys at a time or however many it is. You got that one, right?
Right.
Christian, quote
Right.
unquote. And then the next one, you've got him who, again, I've not heard great things about, but at least he stands on his principle and going, I'm not going to do this,
Yeah.
because it's sin and sin is sin. I'm not going to do it or whatever. Because, like, when was the last time we really heard someone openly that had, like, the world stage call sin no matter what someone thought about him?
I have no idea.
So
been a while.
he at least needs to be commended for that.
Yeah.
I mean, we hear it in church, right?
Right.
But we don't hear it in the world anymore.
No.
And so there's a difference between those two types of Christianity. And I would call hers not really Christianity at all, but that's all another issue.
Yeah.
But
I'd
anyway.
agree. So, anyways, this isn't a show about the Bachelorette or Bachelor.
It isn't.
But
I don't even know. How are you going to title this episode, by the way?
I don't know. D-Now/Bachelorette.
That's hilarious. Like
Maybe
those
that'll
two-
hope people will click on it then because, it's a unique.
Yeah, like you're trying to clickbait people.
Right,
into clicking on our
right.
podcast. That's
You'll
really
love it.
funny.
I'll add Hannah on.
Oh, God,
on,
dude. Are you
all
really?
No, I'm not.
Okay, I would die.
Um,
That's hilarious, though.
so, but we speak everything out of love and kindness. We don't.
Well, we try to,
Yeah.
And I'm kind of a sarcastic person sometimes, quote unquote, sometimes.
Right.
And so I apologize if I'm doing that because, like, even when I'm saying her Twitter handle, I've got some sass back there. But the bottom line is everybody on this show wants to see every person come to know Jesus Christ.
Yep.
Right. Like that's the goal.
That's the goal.
And we want to help people who are confused
Right.
and who are in need of a savior. Who asks us to go and sin no more.
Right.
So, anyway.
So, D-Now this week coming up. Bachelorette. What a fun episode.
Well, maybe someone will ask John Piper about it when he comes back.
Oh, that
Okay,
would be good.
What do you think about this?
By the way, that is a great podcast resource. If you ever are looking for something other than us to listen to,
Yeah. What's it called?
Ask Pastor John.
Ask Pastor John.
and
That's
it's
right.
basically John Piper just answering
Yeah.
questions.
And very rarely are they Calvinists, right? John Piper's
Yeah,
like a
yeah.
7 or 8 point Calvinist or whatever,
Right.
he jokes or whatever.
They're-
But they're very rarely.
Yeah, and they're just all random. I mean, they're very...
Yeah. Yeah. So it's like, should I go on vacation with my girlfriend? Or should I, how do I take every thought captive was one that came up
Right.
the other day.
Yeah.
Things like that.
Yeah, and where he's going through the the good ones now, right?
The ones that have over
played.
300,000 listens or whatever.
Could you imagine? That's
Dude.
crazy. We got to step it up somehow.
Well, we're not John Piper.
We're not John Piper,
but
right?
But yeah, no, I agree. Anyway, thank you for listening to the Pastor and Intern podcast. As always, we want to thank our church family. Without you, we couldn't do this. And thank you to all of our listeners. Without you, we wouldn't have a voice. And so thank you.
Make sure you leave a rating or review on our social media, on the podcast Have a Choice. As you can tell, I'm not Kayla Popwell, so I am butchering her part.
I know. I expected to hear this lovely woman voice, and I heard yours.
Right. So this week is D Now, so that means next week we will look back at D Now and see kind of what happened, how God moved, how expectations were succeeded, how maybe they weren't. So look forward to that. Thank you guys so much, and we are for the Word, for the truth, and for the church. Again, thanks for listening to the Pastor and Intern podcast.